Imam Ibn Al-Jawzi, rahimahullah, he says, quote, and when the Exalted One says, and indeed he to you is an open enemy, it means that shaitan is an obvious enemy. And it means that shaitan has openly broadcasted his enmity to you. Since the time of Adam, he has done this. So the Exalted One says, he only orders you with sin and perversion, and that you might say of Allah what you do not know. When it mentions he orders you with sin, sin here is every sin and ugly thing. Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu says the word sin is only called sin, su', because its punishment is terrible for the one who's done that action. So, sin is the one who is doing this action. As for the one who manifests sin openly, blatantly, and brazenly, this is perversion or fahsha. So when something becomes broadcast openly and brazenly, this is fahsha, perversion. Now, the intent of this ayah and the wisdoms in it are 5 in number. One is it shows that every disobedience a fahsha is every disobedience that possesses a judicial punishment in this life. The fahsha is every disobedience that possesses a judicial punishment in this life. Secondly, the perversion is what has no right to do so or to commit that action in the revealed law and in the sunnah. Thirdly, is it has to do with stinginess, withholding wealth to help others. These 3 statements are famously reported as fatwa from Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu. The 4th wisdom regarding fahsha is that it refers to fornication and adultery, as mentioned by As-Sudai. And 5thly, it refers to all forms of disobedience, because all disobedience brings the wrath of Allah, as said by Muqatil. When the Exalted One says, and that you say of Allah what you do not know, that ayah means that you are declaring something haram for yourselves, when in actuality it is not haram. The Exalted One has said regarding this affair in no uncertain terms, وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمُ اتَّبِعُوا مَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ قَالُوا بَلْ نَتَّبِعُ مَا أَلْفَيْنَا عَلَيْهِ آبَاءَنَا أَوَلَوْ كَانَ آبَاؤُهُمْ لَا يَعْقِلُونَ شَيْئًا وَلَا يَهْتَدُونَ وَمَثَلُ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا كَمَثَلِ الَّذِي يَنْعِقُ بِمَا لَا يَسْمَعُ إِلَّا دُعَاءً وَنِدَاءً صُمٌّ بُكْمٌ عُمْيٌ فَهُمْ لَا يَعْقِلُونَ يا أيها الذين آمنوا كلوا من طيبات ما رزقناكم واشكروا لله إن كنتم إياه تعبدون إنما حرم عليكم الميتة والدم ولحم الخنزير وما أهل به لغير الله فمن اضطر غير باغ ولا عاد فلا إثم عليه إن الله غفور رحيم. When it is said to them, follow what Allah has sent down, they say, but we follow what we found our fathers upon. And what is the case if their fathers knew nothing and weren't guided? The likeness of those who disbelieve is like the one who calls out with that which he does not hear. He only hears calling and yelling and speech calling out to him. Deaf, dumb and blind, they do not recollect nor reflect. You who believe, eat from the good things that we have sustained you from, and be grateful to Allah if you indeed worship Him alone. It has only been declared as haram for you that which has been found dead, blood, the flesh of swine, and what has been sacrificed to other than Allah and dedicated in worship to other than Allah. Whoever is forced, not intending wrongdoing, nor transgressing the bounds, there is no sin upon him. Indeed, Allah is forgiving and merciful. Surat Al-Baqarah, ayat 170 to 173. So when it is said to them, follow that which Allah had sent down, there are a number of incidents that caused this ayah to be revealed. Firstly, it was regarding those who, when it was said to them, eat that which is in the earth, halal and wholesome. The word, when this happened, some people were not convinced of this, as stated by Muqatil. Secondly, it was sent down regarding the Jews. And this story has already been discussed before about them in the past. It was mentioned by Ibn Ishaq and narrated from Ibn Abbas. The third thing that triggered this was it was talking about the idol worshippers of the Arabs and the unbelievers of the Arabs. Now, the intent of what Allah has sent down, what was being referred to when it mentioned what Allah sent down? What Allah sent down was discussing that which He had declared as halal and that which He had declared as haram. And secondly, that which Allah sent down was Islam. So there were three things that Allah had sent down, if you will. One is that which has been declared as halal, that which has been declared as haram. Number two was Islam. And number three, Tawheed and Islam. So when the people said, in the words of the Exalted One, we found our fathers on a way, and what if their fathers knew nothing, meaning of the deen, and they weren't guided by the deen? How can they follow them in their following the footsteps of shaitan and their lies if they're wrong? This is why they have no intellect and they don't think, because they follow them. As for the likeness of those who disbelieve are like the one who hears the shouting or the calling of the beast, this is referring to three things in its meaning. Those who disbelieve are like the beasts of the earth, in which they hear the call, but they don't understand anything except for the shout and the sound that comes from the mouth and the throat of the one calling. So they are similar to that. So when the shepherd calls the sheep, they don't hear the actual tone in the shepherd's voice. They merely bleat for the shepherd, and they hear the shepherd's calling for them, just like they hear the bleating of themselves as the sheep bleat among themselves. Yes, the unbelievers are like the beasts in the earth, which do not understand what the shepherd is saying any more than his voice. If the shepherd was to say to them, "You be the shepherd now," or "You drink, you show the people how to drink," or "You shepherd the other sheep," if he was to deputize one of the other sheep, the sheep wouldn't know what he was saying, for he is a sheep. Likewise, those who are unbelievers, when there comes to them of the Quran and the warnings of the messenger that has brought it, he is the shepherd that has come to them, but they hear nothing and they continue to bleat. And this is a clear statement that we can see in the language of Arabic, that these people, they hear nothing but the sound. Close quote. So this statement about the unbelievers that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because yan'iqu is usually referring to the bleating of sheep, when sheep bleat or when goats baa and things like this. When Allah is saying that the likeness of those who disbelieve are like those who they're bleating about what they don't hear, except the dua, except when the person's calling them or calling out to them. So the dog, when you call him and he barks, he doesn't bark because he necessarily is responding to the fact that the tone in your voice and that you know his name and that his name is Billy and that he's your dog and he's responding. It's not like that. The dog or the cat or the mongoose or whatever number of pets that people may have, they are responding because of stimulus. They know that a certain number of sounds represents you calling them. It was said once, a man insisted among us that his dog could speak. And we said, "How can your dog? There's no way your dog can speak." He said, "I'll show you that the dog can speak." And so we said he made the dog bark by saying, "What's on top of a house?" And the dog barked and said, "Rough." And he said, what does sandpaper feel like?" And the dog barked again and it sounded like rough. Right? And he asked it another question. It sounded like rough, and his name was Ralph. He said, "What's my name?" And he barked, and it sounded like rough, and it sounded like Ralph to some people. And he said, "You see, so the dog, it talks." But what we learned from that is, in actuality, it doesn't. It was just responding to the statements that he was making. It wasn't really comprehending everything. So you'll see scientific experiments where they're trying to get the chimpanzee to understand calculus and applied math. They're trying to make him understand trigonometry. But what the chimpanzee or what the orangutan or the gorilla has understood is patterns. He's understood, when I do these things, I receive a treat. So I must continue to do these particular things. They mentioned that they fed rats. We've taught rats how to feed. We've cured them of cancer. We've done different things with rats. But the rat has learned, if I feed or I eat or I don't eat, I receive rewards, or I receive food, or I receive extra water, or if it's taken from me if I don't do these things. They've learned a reward and punishment system. But that doesn't mean that they've learned to reflect and that they have wisdom and they have intellect. And it's not that the rat or the sheep or the donkey will be sitting wondering about Aesop's fables or about whether Karl Marx's socialism or whether democracy is a viable system, and whether they should be considering unions for sheep, or whether or not. Animals are not reflecting in that pattern. And you have to ask yourself, because some people treat animals in the same way, because they get offended when they see ayat like this, because they say, "Well, why are they saying they're like the animals? What's wrong with animals?" right? We eat animals. That's what's wrong. We eat animals. Animals are for consumption.